Good morning, everyone. We're in Wangaratta at the ASITA third convention. Today's the 19th of June and it's quite sunny outside. My name's Frank Hinton. I'm the president of ASITA, which is the Australian Commercial and Entertainment Technology Association, and we are the people's body for the sector. And we're now in the Archive of Excellence program, and today we're going to shoot the fifth episode, the fifth 50-minute episode. So the fourth is in the can and is being prepared. It's the fourth episode is John Fowler. And so just running through, the first episode we had was Roger Savage. The second episode was Colin Stevenson. The third episode was Murray Tregoning. The fourth episode, as I said, John Fowler. And now we're shooting the fifth episode of the Archive of Excellence. These Archive of Excellence programs have proven to be phenomenally popular. They've ended up in the UK, Europe, in Hollywood, at the BBC, at Sky TV. They've gone all around the world. And they're also being used in universities, in education courses, particularly audio engineering. And so they're an invaluable documentation of marvellous careers. And so the Archive of Excellence was designed to acknowledge and certainly honour remarkable people, remarkable with the emphasis on what they gave, not what they took from the industry. And we're talking particularly about not just their skills, their innovation, whether it be in design or whatever. We're looking here at things like mentoring, making things possible for other people, enhancing people's careers. And it's all about, as I say, not what you took and how much money you made. It's all about the sort of person you are and the contribution you've made to the industry over a long period of time. And so our candidate today would be known to all of you, particularly in the audio industry, but there'd be a lot that you wouldn't know, such as his musician background, his professional playing, his touring, and so on and so forth, aside from his participation at the very top level of the audio industry internationally. So without any further ado, would you please welcome David Bell. You call yourself a working class boy from the inner west of Sydney.
Oh, Marrickville, yeah. I sound like Albanese. It was a row house, born and raised in what we call a row house, shared a wall, and that's where I first got to learn to, appreciate ethnic cooking. The neighbourhood started out Australian and then it went Greek, and all these great smells used to waft over. Italian, and then Lebanese before I bailed out and started roaming around.
Bit of chop suey as well from the Chinese.
Oh, I know, mate. No, the Chinese weren't there at that stage, but the mid-Europeans were, and it was great. And they were great to my mum too. They were super people.
Okay, so where did it all begin for you then in terms of your journey that you undertook? Was that to do with learning to play an instrument, music education? Could you tell us a bit about that?
I guess it did. I mean, back in the day there was no real music education in schools, at least. I was lucky. I went to a selective high school, Canterbury Boys High, same school as John Howard, for those that are inclined to know about that. And it was a great school, but there was no music program. It was STEM, which was great for building a career later, as I found. But of course, we started a high school band, and I had a set of bongos, and of course, I didn't have a drum kit. And the drummer had the drum kit, so I talked him into letting me play it occasionally. So that's where I got started. And the name of the band was the Vipers. So we played at school dances and stuff, and that sort of got me interested in the whole music thing. As a matter of fact, I fell in love with it there. Yeah.
What age?
Oh boy, 16, 17, come steaming out of school, failed the leaving certificate. I was too busy playing rugby, water polo, chasing girls, and so I went back and got it second year round. But in the meantime, I decided that, you know, music was something I wanted to chase. Convinced my dad to sign a hire purchase agreement for a drum kit, which was arguably one of the toughest sales of my life. And as I look back on my career, I sort of fancy myself as not a bad salesman. And the old man really got me honed up when I was 17. My brother, or half brother, I should say, super bloke. And Dad reckoned that he didn't have a mechanical bone in his body, which stressed the old man because he was a boilermaker, a blacksmith, and a sheet metal worker. And so he had trades out the wazoo. Anyway, Fred came home from the job that Dad had got him as a clerk, and with some papers for Dad to sign. And the old man signed them, and he said, "What's this?" He said, "Oh, I'm joining the army, the reserves, you know, the weekend warriors." And the old man said, "Oh, that's good." So he said, 2 weeks later, Fred comes home, packs his bag, is off to the regular army. He'd filled the old man. And what he'd signed up for was RAME, Royal Australian Electrical Mechanical Engineers, and that just threw salt into the wound. Not only did he filled Dad, he'd gone off into an engineering group, which the old man thought, you know, he'll last 20 minutes. So when it come to me buying my first drum kit, and I came home with a hire purchase agreement, that really honed my selling skills. Bought a drum kit, practiced at home, annoyed the hell out of everybody. As you can imagine, we're still sharing a wall with neighbours and stuff. And then saw an ad in the paper for working band wanting drummer. And I thought, oh, does that sound like me? Off I went to the audition out in the western suburbs. And my brand new kit of sky blue pearls. One of the things that annoyed me a lot in my early musical career was people come up and say, "Oh, same drums as Ringo Starr." You know, now I got a hell of a lot of admiration for the Beatles. They changed my life. But Ringo, didn't John Lennon say, somebody asked him and said, "Oh, do you think Ringo's a good drummer?" And he said, "McCartney plays better drums than Ringo." I bought the Sky Blue Pearls because Joe Morello played them, you know, Dave Brubeck's drummer. So that was me, you know, I was, you know, pop star. So that got me started. It was a quartet. They had a job at a pub in the western suburbs of Sydney, right on just where Liverpool Road came down. It was affectionately a blood house, you know. Friday night, Saturday afternoon, Saturday night we worked there. And the middleweights would get started. Those could only drink 6 or 7 schooners. They'd start punching up out on Parramatta Road at about 8:30. And then it'd be followed by the welters. And then the heavyweights would be out there that could drink at least 12 schooners before they got pugilistic. And they'd be at it while we were lugging our gear out. So that was the start of my musical career.
Okay. So moving along a little bit, so you eventually ended up leading your own bands, and they tended to be show bands, and you had residencies at places like the Rex in Sydney.
Yeah, that was...
in the R&R American troop days of the Vietnam War, you would have seen a lot of sights there, but we won't go into that. But do you want to just touch on... And you ended up with some pretty bloody good players in your bands. I'm thinking one of my favourites, the Major from Sounds Incorporated.
Dave Glide, monster saxophone player. Yeah. Also, the guy before Dave was a monster too, Keith Barr. He came out, he was Shirley Bassey's sax player. And, you know, back in those days, the international artists come out, and the Musicians Union had a deal here that you know, for every musician you bought, you had to, I think, put 2 Australian musicians in. That was fun. We went and saw the Buddy Rich rehearse, and it's a whole other story. But anyway, Keith came out with Shirley as her horn player. He played. I've not seen all his horns on the stand with anybody else ever. He played baritone, tenor, soprano, sopranino, and cor anglais, and had all the horns. You can imagine the embouchure of the guy. I mean, and he was only a little guy, and the tenor was almost as the bass sax was almost as big as him, the baritone, and so he was, I think, arguably one of the best musicians I've ever worked with. Yeah, no, that was fun. You know, we got spotted when we were working at the Rex with a quartet, and got yanked out of there and down to some nightclub in the Cross, and then we all looked at each other, and the musical leader of the band, Perry, he was a guitar player, great ear. He was a bank Johnny. The bass player, his brother, was a motor mechanic. Rod, the other rhythm guitarist, he finished up playing a lot of trumpet and stuff too. He had a job as a clerk somewhere, and I was working for Dunlop Rubber, so we all decided to pitch our jobs, and we thought, oh, this is it, you know. None of us wanted to be pop stars. That's the weird thing. You know, back in it was sort of Thorpey, and I guess because we were all a bit jazz oriented, dare I say it, we were a bit smug. And we didn't see ourselves as pop stars at all. You know, we all thought they were sort of a bunch of pimply-faced, you know, and I'm being terrible here, especially to my mate Roger up the back here, who's clearly a pop star, but he's one of the elite ones. He could actually, you know, we didn't see, again, ego, we didn't see that pop industry as sort of, they weren't real musicians from our perspective. Now, you call that arrogance and ego, and you're probably damn right, you know, but we went, you know, we wanted to go see bands. We went and saw Don Burrows, George Goller playing down at Macambo in Newtown, you know, John Pochet on drums playing with his hands. How did he do that, you know? And so that was the sort of stuff that influenced us musically, and we carried that over into what we played, and we loved getting pop tunes. And as you heard, an incredible example of that last night, taking great pop tunes and smacking your own arrangements to them, you know, and you know, the guys last night were sensational. So that's what we sort of liked to do, and that led to being a show band, I guess, because residencies in those days were the thing. I mean, you didn't tour, you know, I mean, who wanted to do that? There were no roadies. You know, so you get a gig, and it was like, if it wasn't 6 months, you'd go, oh, what did we say that was wrong? You know, you get 6 months and it was great. You could rehearse there, didn't have to pack anything up and all that sort of stuff. So that, you know, that sort of led to show bands, and that led to tours through Southeast Asia and stuff. And yeah, it was a lot of fun.
So moving on, before we get to your business side of it, which is what these folk would mostly know of you, what about the touring side? You know, rumour has it you were, in terms of touring, at one stage you were the Bee Gees drummer.
No, I wasn't the Bee Gees drummer, mate. I went out with the Support Act. We toured with them.
Right.
And it was funny. There was a sort of Bee Gees thread ran through my career and some of the guys. We won a Battle of the Band thing as a quartet in Canberra, which wasn't hard, and got launched down to Melbourne for the finals, where we got completely towed up by Mississippi, the forerunner of LRB, and Parker with his band. Doug Parkinson, he comes second, and we dragged in, you know, a sorry ass third, and that taught us a lot about pop music. It actually reinforced everything we thought we knew about it, because we come out of backstage at Festival Hall and people were trying to tear our suits off. Well, we'd never seen this before. We worked in pubs, you know, nobody did. They wanted to punch you out the front at 10 o'clock, but they didn't want to tear your clothes. So, you know, we made the right decision. This pop stuff's not for us. But no, I toured a Support Act. It was funny. There was a pop band called Mr. George. They had a couple of hits, and they were a good outfit. So they were running around looking for a drummer, and I could read, and I knew the guitar player, and I was on musician's holiday, you know, I was sort of out of work. And yeah, I got the gig. So that was fun. So yeah, you know, with Cassidy, with Pimpley and the Bee Gees. And then it's sort of a thread run through that. We got a recording contract, and we're in the studio, in this funny little studio, I forget, Hurstville somewhere. That's where the Bee Gees were recording at the same time. And you know, I heard Roger talking about effects. I mean, the echo chamber there was in a house in Hurstville, I think, and they run the audio lines through the house, and there was a real old house, and it had a brick outhouse, a brick toilet. And there was a speaker in the top of and a microphone down here. And you moved the microphone and just how much echo you wanted, you know. So, and that was the echo on Spicks and Specs. They wrote a couple of tunes for us, and then years later, here I was on tour with them. Naturally, they didn't remember me, because they came in and listened to what we were doing, and we were singing a lot of harmony stuff. It was a 4-piece harmony band. And so they thought, oh, that's really nice. So they wrote 2 tunes for us, and we recorded them. And the single come out the same day as the Beatles' Yellow Submarine. That's right. And yeah, so that's how long ago that was. I was clean shaven. So yeah, that was my brush with popdom.
Okay,
Frank?
So we then, I guess, we're moving up chronologically to the time you entered the entertainment technology industry on the business side of it. Is that the case?
Yeah, pretty much.
So you went, I think you joined a distribution company.
Correct. I got to the point, I guess,
And the year?
oh boy, 71, 71, something like that. Come out of Thredbo. I'd been down there again with the trio out of the original quartet. We were back together again after we'd all gone separate ways for a while. And come out of, and I thought, oh, there's got to be more to this. I just didn't see myself. To be frank, I got disenchanted a little with the music industry. I saw, I'd become friends with Warren Daly, those if you remember the Daly Wilson Big Band. And I had a penchant for audio then, and I was very much into the natural thing, and Warren asked me to come do sound for the big band. And so, got some speakers and just a few mics, he didn't, the acoustic thing was what they wanted. So, with Warren, it was, a couple AKG overheads and a kick drum mic. He hit them hard enough, and that's all you needed. And a couple of mics in front of the saxes, and the trumpets got into that, and the trombones got into that, and so I did some work with Warren, and I just marvelled at how he played, and I thought to myself, I was a journeyman drummer. I was, I could read and stuff, but I thought to myself, if I rehearse, I used to do an hour a day. If I up that to 3 hours a day for 5 years, and Warren stands still, with a bit of luck he might sprain a wrist. In 5 years' time, I couldn't sit at his feet. Could not sit at his feet as a player. And I thought, and he's not making any money. So what chance have I got? So I thought, that's it. It's a hobby. That's what it is. It's a hobby. So
right. So you transitioned.
Yeah, I started, and there was an ad in the paper for a salesman. I thought, oh well, I used to always do the negotiations for the band, so maybe I got a leg up in that industry. So I answered the ad, and it was for a company called W.C. Wetherspoon, and they were the importers of AR loudspeakers back in the day, which were heavy hitters, Bose, Micropoint cutting styli, I think Eventide signal processing, a few other bits and pieces, from that industry. So I went along and auditioned, I still talk like that after all these years. I went along and did the interview and got a phone call from Max, and he said, mate, like your style and your cut, he said, but he said, I've hired somebody else. I said, oh, okay. who would that be? He said, Trevin Johns, he was from JBL at the time. I said, oh, okay, I didn't know, I said, oh, that's a bummer, hang up. 2 weeks later, the phone rings against Max. He said, come and talk to me. I said, sure, I'll go out. And it turns out that Trevin was, he and I have laughed about this since then, so I can talk about it. What he was doing was leveraging JBL for more money, right? So when he got the job with Max, so I started with Max, and that's really kicked me off. What a great guy. He's my first mentor, and now I was in an area that I was really loving. I was in the audio business. My job was to listen to speakers, figure out why somebody would buy them, and then go and tell somebody about that.
And is Bose included in this?
Yeah, Bose had, they had one product at that stage. They had the 901, which sort of, faced backwards and everybody hated. And that was, and then that evolved. And Max Roberts, the owner of the company. He's smart. He saw the influx of Japanese multinationals coming into the country, and he decided as a distributor, if he was going to survive, he had to get closer contacts. So he thought, right, closer contacts with his suppliers. So we thought, okay, I know what to do. We'll make speakers here, because at that stage, the import duties and sales taxes on speakers added about, on domestic side, I think about 17 or 18%, and on the pro side it was about 20, 21.
25.
25, yeah. So if you could manufacture them locally and add in the Australian content, and they also allowed you to add the profit into the Australian content. So if you can get above 50, 51%, you didn't pay the tax. So Max thought, okay, cool, what do I do here? So he saw Bose at the time as a bit of a winner in the domestic audio scene, and I guess he was right. He went off to Bose and said, well, I want to manufacture the speakers locally. And they said, well, Max, that'd be nice, but no. And at that time, what we didn't realise is they were getting into moulded plastic internals, which we couldn't buy the mould or make it out here in Australia. So the shipping costs went away, the savings, I should say, and just building a box around that, there wasn't enough. So Max said, okay, jumped in a car, and he drove I think about 6 miles in American lineage up to Acoustic Research and pitched them the same deal, and they bought into it with 2 caveats. One, you had to get rid of that other loudspeaker system from down in Massachusetts, because Bose and AR were doing this big time in the marketplace, at this stage. And that you've got to build an anechoic chamber. We'll engineer it, but you've got to pay for it. Max said, fine. So here we are out in 3 Ford Street, Greenacre in Sydney, and we had our own anechoic chamber for testing. I think it was arguably one of 3 anechoic chambers in Australia. And this is in the 70s. So yeah, that got me started, mate, and loved it. Working for Max was just so much fun. And I think that one of the toughest days of my life was going in and talking to Max after 6 years. Bose came out and pitched me an offer to head up the subsidiary, along with another guy who some of you might know, John McTavish, and Macca the Pirate. So I took it, and I had to go tell Max that I was resigning, and it was really, really hard for me. So that got me, into the Bose and thing, and that was fun. I mean, here's Macca and I, we had a desk in the lounge room, 2 phones, one on each side. Bose Australia, and well, this is going on for a few years. And the service department was in my garage, with woofer replacement, wheat tweeters and screwdrivers and all that stuff. No anechoic chamber, we left that behind at Wetherspoons, which was a shame. And that was fun. I mean, 6, 7 years. John bailed after 2, and he wanted to get into retail, and so he did. And so I built the subsidiary up. We took it from sort of kind of zero. I think in 6 or 7 years, we were running around 8 million. And it turned out that Australia was selling more Pro speakers per capita than anywhere else in the world. Which I guess wasn't hard because they weren't selling much anywhere of the Pro products. And so I got a phone call, and it was the old man, Amar Bose, you know. He said, would you consider coming out to the United States? And my off the cuff was, no, why? You know, I was building a business here. I loved it. The subsidiary, you know, I'd hired 5 or 6 people. They were great. They were smarter than me, and we were just tearing the cover off the ball. I said, no, I'm not really interested. What would you want me to do? He said, oh, we would like you to head up the professional. No, excuse me. He said, we would like you to do something with the professional products division. I went, oh, do something. Oh, I think, you know, okay. So we got talking, went home and talked to my lovely wife about it at the time, and she still is at the time. It's 52 years, by the way, that we've been together, so you get less for murder, right? Anyway, went home and discussed it with Karen and our 8-year-old, who was all for it because she was going to be closer to Mickey Mouse. And so we did. And I found a replacement for myself as the general manager of the subsidiary, which was another hard sell because it was the accountant. And he was, I don't know, he was an accountant that you always want. He'd unload containers. He went and bought a little, we used to have to send a report back to head office every month. Full stock take, full P&L, the whole lot. They wanted to make sure that, you know, none of us were like tickling the till, you know, which was fair. However, it was on a telex machine. Now, I can see some nodding out here. The telex tape would run all the way across the floor and down the stairs. And it got to the point where I used to do it at night because if somebody put their foot on it and broke it, oh, you could start again, you know, on the machine. So anyway, the accountant, he was just fantastic. So I talked them into allowing him, because they weren't, the Bose model in those days was the general manager would be a sales and marketing entrepreneurial sort of dude, and he reported to the president of the company, and then the accountant. That you had to have an accountant, and he reported to the CFO, and so that really kept the place honest in a way. You know, there was it was pretty. If you were of a mind to fiddle the till, it was pretty hard. Not that I ever was, but that was the way it went. And so the CFO, the accountant guy, was he an entrepreneur enough to be the general manager and fit the Bose mould? Well, they didn't think so. So I talked him into it, and Bob, I felt like I'd been the sheet anchor. When I left Bose Australia, you know, Bob took it off like a rocket. And I went over to head up the professional products division.
At this point, can I add something here that you probably weren't aware of? Maybe you were a bit too modest. But I remember in the industry, and I'd met David in the early days of Wetherspoons when he'd just joined, you know, the audio technology sort of sector in the 70s. I'd met Dave. And he was the complete package. You know, he was a great salesman, but he was one of those salesmen that everything cut both ways. Any negotiation was good for both parties. So he was very well respected. So when the news came around the industry that the working class boy from inner West Sydney had got a gig, and a senior gig, in this emerging, growing company called Bose, got a gig in Massachusetts, you know, leading the Pro division. There was a vast amount of pride, you know, within the industry that, you know, for one of the first Australians that made good in the USA, you know, where all the technology was coming from at the time. So yeah, we all sort of thought, this is cool. This is really, really good. So you've arrived in America.
Yeah, well, that's nice to know, mate. Little did you know that when I arrived over there, the professional products division consisted of one administrator, a bunch of hi-fi guys selling Pro products throughout the US, no Pro salespeople. And in Europe, Pro products was seen as a self-liquidating advertising expense for hi-fi. And that was its high water mark. It got worse after that. Some subsidiary managers saw it as a pariah, you know, and a waste of money, and continued to try and lobby to get rid of the damn thing. Thankfully, the old man, Dr. Bose, was in my corner, and when I arrived over there, I was hit with 2 or 3 things. One was my office, which was the electrical riser cupboard, and all the stuff, you know. The temperature in there of a summertime, it was amazing. All I had was like electrical cables running down, went up to the next floor. There was enough space for a desk. That was the one thing. So I didn't mind that so much. But I walked into, I'm not very good politically. I arrived over there and nobody, who's this, what? You're from where? Australia? Who'd you ever beat? You know, and you're taking over you're going to Pro products? We're not interested in Pro, but that was sort of the mentality I run into, and I walked into Bose. And as I said, the only guy that was in my corner was the boss, and it's nice to have him in your corner, and the president as well, because they'd recruited me. But I couldn't bring myself to run to them, you know, with sooky tales of this is really hard. So it was just it was a tough time the first year or two, but I was sort of happy with the fact I got some real help from the hi-fi national sales manager, who went on to he left after a number of years, and he became president of Polk Audio. Really smart guy, and he helped me a lot overcome this, because everything was going past me. I'd been a reasonable sized fish in a small pond in Australia, and I got over there and I'm a minnow in the ocean, you know, and things were going. I couldn't get my hands fast enough to catch stuff. It was, and so yeah, it took a while to adjust to that, but it was a wild ride.
But you did.
Oh yeah.
You damn well did, and Bose were the better for you being there. But some 20 years after being there, you got the call. You got the call from none other than JBL. Yeah,
that was pretty weird. We'd built the Pro business had come from 4 or 5 million a year internationally to just sub 100 million. We had our own, I managed to get the Pro out from underneath the consumer audio business. It was now, we had our own engineering group, which we didn't have before. If Pro wanted a new product, you had to go, with the tin cup to the hi-fi guys, and they'd give you an engineer for a while. So we had our own engineering group, our own production. We had our own building actually, which was sort of cool. It was down, there was the mountain up there, and then we took over. They found just below Bose headquarters, in the same, I guess you'd call it a campus. There was a digital when digital went south. So we got that building. So we're on our own now, and so it was sort of cool. So we built it up, and but I could see that there were too many people now wanting my job, and I don't know about you guys, but us Australians, I particularly was not good at internal politics. The enemy to me was on the outside, not on the inside, and so I didn't handle that stuff very well, and it started to aggravate me, and the bloom was off the rose a little bit for me, and then I got this phone call from a headhunter, and it turned out it was that other loudspeaker manufacturer over on the West Coast who will remain nameless, and after much negotiation, I left Bose and took up a job as a VP of sales for JBL. That was sort of fun because I had the whole lot. I had the US sales and all international sales as well.
Then you went to to another company for a couple of years that you worked with in America and then England.
Yeah, after 2 years at JBL, and talk about, oh God, this is awful, but I will mention it. Talk about politics. I hated them, and I was out of the frying pan into the fire. I mean, you know, Harman at the time was a $1.4 billion operation. JBL was the jewel in the crown of the Pro division. The Pro division, JBL was doing about $130 million a year, I think, at the time, which I was shocked because I thought they were doing, you know, we'd grown, you know, no highs, no lows must be boast at like just sub 100 million, and there's our biggest competitor that, you know, we're all out there in the marketplace hacking at, they're only 40%. So anyway, the politics there were so thick. Consumer hated pro, pro hated consumer, and so I lasted 2 years in that environment. And the president of JBL at the time, we were a mismatch very much. He was very much into pushing product in to distributors and dealers, and I was much more into selling it through and then helping them sell it through, push it out, you know, and get that sort of thing, because, you know, the factory typically has engineering and marketing resources that dealers and distributors don't have. So I used to like to leverage that, you know, all the time. And but my boss was, yeah, so we just didn't get along. So after 2 years, I was out of JBL and looking around, and a company I had done some work with, a company called DMX Music, and they were headed up by a guy, a real entrepreneur. He'd made his money out of the music business. He grew up in, he was a lawyer and an accountant, which, you know, I can see you sort of cringing. You're right, that's a deadly double act to have in terms of degrees. And he made his money, all his mates were out into the music business in the 60s and 70s when they came out of college, and in LA. And what he saw was an idea to take all that money that these artists were generating, and they were either getting ripped off by their agencies, or they were drinking it or smoking it or, you know, inhaling it, all this dough. And so he thought, let's put a company together that says, we will take X amount of your salary on an annual basis and we'll invest it and we'll wet our beak on the way through. And he did that, oh gee, let me think, some of the acts, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, I think, anyway, 3 or 4 big time acts that were making a lot of money. So he decided, then he went and decided that Muzak was awful, and it didn't represent the creativity and the expertise of the artists, just because it sounded like crap. And so he put together a company that distributed digital quality audio via satellite to restaurant and hospitality industry in you know, direct competition with Muzak. And so I went to work for him for a while, and then he wanted to open up a company in Europe. So we put together a little a startup company. There were 3 of us, you know, emptied what little we had into it. And when it was called Extra Music, and we went over and so yeah, we rented space on the satellite, and we were dropping 80 channels of digital quality audio across Europe and the UK, and so that was fun. I learned how to sell that by getting a little demo kit and dragging it up and down the high streets of London, and then we finished up. We had, it was about 25 of us, I think, or 30. Opened up distributors and using independent reps throughout Europe. And that was a wild ride, because I'd go over, I'd get on the train on Sunday night and to go across to the Eurostar and to France, and then I'd spend the week, you know, out in different countries working with our salespeople. And then on Friday night, my wife would jump on the train and come over, and we'd spend the weekend somewhere wherever I was. So that was a blast. We both got to see a lot of Europe, which was a lot of fun. And then I guess AT&T, the American telephone company, merged with one of the largest cable companies in the US, and they decided that everybody wanted something digital in their portfolio in the late 90s, and so they decided they bought DMX in the US. They bought our company, Extra Music, and they had their eyes on AEI Music, who probably most of you would know and remember, and they wanted to glom them all together. So they bought us, and they offered me a job back in California as a VP of marketing, and my real job was to pull the three companies together, which was a lot of fun.
And then, given the time, ultimately you made the decision to come back to Australia.
Oh yeah.
Was that to retire or?
Nah.
No.
I think that's a good question. I could be trite and say, when you start to look like your passport photograph, it's time to quit. And but no, Karen and I were always going to come home. I mean, we went away on a 3-year contract and stayed 17 or 18 or something, but we were always going to come home,
So you came home to Jan's?
Yeah, funny enough,
Yep.
I put myself out on the market because I wasn't ready to quit. And Paul Mulholland, who I'd worked with, we were fierce competitors when I was in Australia back in the day, because they had the JBL consumer stuff at that stage. And I didn't know much about Paul, but except that we used to compete. And then he was a customer when I was with JBL, and so I got to know him a bit better there, and he got to know me. And he offered me a job there as sort of a director of.
Yep. And after a few years, you went to Syntec.
I did. Yeah, I did.
And had a few years there as well.
I know. I tried my hand at retirement, and that lasted about 3 months.
It did, yeah.
I don't know who woke up to it first, whether it was me that was bored senseless or my wife decided having me underfoot was just too much of a pain in the tail. So between the pair of us, I decided to go back to work.
And then, of course, during your time at Syntec, the notion of ASITA comes up. The industry decides, and I ended up in a leadership role, not setting out to be, but the first thing that we had to do from an industry that had never been united was meetings, and it's like, so what do we do now? And it's like, well, industry association, not for profit, you've got to have a constitution. What's a constitution? Right, okay. I'd been involved with a few charities, not-for-profit things, so I foolishly, at a Melbourne meeting and a Sydney meeting, said, all right, I'll write the constitution. And then you get home and you think you've shot your stupid big bloody mouth off again, again. And anyway, the bottom line was at a meeting in Sydney, the first one, I'd said to this meeting that, the Melbourne guys want to form an association. Sydney guys said, yeah, we do too. And so the bottom line was that I said, well, I've offered to write a constitution. Oh, you've got to do this and that and the other. So we set about it, and Dave, which is Dave's want, and experience and capability, said, I'll help you. And so the two of us jointly got stuck into doing the constitution, which took quite some months. So we prepared it all, and we looked at various constitutions, and boy, they were out of the ark, some of them, like hundreds, terrible, and very blokey, and seemed to, didn't recognise that we had electronic technology as well. So Dave and I, and I'd always wanted to work with Dave, but never did, except we did get the chance with ASITA. We got to work together in a voluntary capacity to put the constitution together, which is our founding document, and will always be, and so, we did get to work together, and that was a lot of fun. And we did it, we got together face to face, he was in Sydney, I was in Melbourne. So also Dave has done a lot of work, and he's been also been a mentor to me, And also Asita does owe David a lot because he does a lot of that advice sort of stuff behind the scenes.